no thought, there is no energy, there is no world. Okay. Yet people would come and say, they might say, yeah, there is energy. And I would ask them, okay, what is your experience? Is there energy for you when you're in deep sleep?
So along the gross body is those are the physical sensations, the subtle body is the mind and the thoughts. And then the causal body is
still thoughts, habits that are dormant and they're just waiting to come into fruition.
Those are the latent tendencies.
Yes, even someone in samadhi, they are sitting in samadhi and all the habits would play themselves out into the surface. They just don't act upon it.
So these are like the core beliefs?
Can be, yes.
Yeah. Where the thoughts arise from.
Yeah. So instead of saying core beliefs, they call it vasanas, latent tendencies, habits that I unconsciously planted the seeds there. And I don't even know what they are. They would come into the surface. They would have to come into the surface and they have to be seen and not acted upon it. Because the acting upon it plants more seeds.
Is that like what you were talking about where prana goes through lifetimes? So someone in the next incarnation then it's like prana has a life of its own where it moves through space and time, and so then the latent tendencies could move with the prana through next incarnations.
It's with the soul. It goes together, braided with the soul. See, a manifestation of what we call the personality of the ego is made of many egos which are the soul. So a lot of times the personality comes in and it builds one block on top of another, and then suddenly one has this particular personality. So it's not only from one lifetime. Okay? Mm-hmm. So it always moves. If there is any movement, prana always would move it, right? Prana is in charge of all activity of the universe, so it moves any movement to continue. So I don't remember what I was talking about just that in the causal body is seen it's the latent tendency, it's the habits. One would say it's core beliefs. Yeah, it's just another maybe name. Sometimes it's not a core belief because they point, and you experience it when you go deep inwardly, is that the 4 obstacles. So the wise, the sages brought through compassion and grace, because they went through the obstacles, they share what are the obstacles and how to overcome them. Because if they would share just the obstacles and then not necessarily how to overcome them, then one would have to find for themselves. That's okay too. It's just a map. So it gives you start being aware. So obstacles would be, and this is when one is already in samadhi. So one of the obstacles would be the mind is lazy. Okay? When the mind is lazy, one of the ways to get it awakened again is by different practices, by hearing, reading. Sometimes they take it even to chanting and singing, just to awaken that vibration. Okay? So the mind is lazy, to overcome it, would be expose it to something that awakens it. Okay, I'll touch it and explain how come. Because when the mind, when it goes out to the objects of the world are the cause of projections. Is it clear? The objects of the world is the cause of projection, means if I don't see something, I don't have thoughts about that thing, right? So if I see an object, suddenly, wow, it's a great object, I think about it. I use an example of meeting. Let's say you're meeting a man or a woman. You meet that man or that woman. You never saw that man or woman before. You didn't have thought about this man or woman. You met that man or woman. You walk away. Now suddenly you have thoughts about. So what was the cause of your projections? Was that object, that person? I'm talking about this physical form right now, yes? So the objects can be the cause of projections when the mind goes out. So if we know that, then if you want to use wisdom, when the mind goes out, get it exposed to words that will turn the mind back inside. Because if not, it will get into objects that will pull it outside. So if one wants to know the truth and the mind goes out, then I would get the mind to be exposed to hearing the knowledge, reading, staying around the subject, being around, that will turn the mind back in. Yes? So when we look at this enables to see the wisdom and mechanism how to really implement to turn the mind back in. Because the habit of the mind is to go out. And the only way out is in. So one has to turn the mind in. Unless they want to turn it out, I tell them, have a nice journey. I'm not going with you. Hasta la vista. That's fine. I respect. That's their journey.
So
it's out.
Finding things that are truly reflective, that are going to reflect back in. So this is when you hear them speak of like the jewel mirror samadhi. It's finding things out here that are going to reflect you back inside.
It's direct the mind back. So sometimes when you're around a being that abiding or all their attention is in, when you're around them, all it does, they push your mind inward. And they pull it from within because it's awareness pulling it from within. Awareness, it's like a magnet, it pulls the needle in. So that naturally happens. So if the mind wants to go out, it won't stay around that person. Because this is like, if we get people that are totally outward, and they come 5 minutes, maybe 1 minute, they step out the door and say, this is garbage what they hear, what's going on here. Because they're not interested. They're seeking what they are desiring. So if you don't desire the truth, this is a nonsense. If you desire the truth, it might attract you. So it all depends what one desire. Come back to. So
Alon, will you mention with desire, you're saying the two ways. One is through discrimination, and then the other, we talked about the second one extensively, but will you just say a little bit about using discrimination to dismantle desire?
So the first step of discrimination, I have to see the defects of it.
You have to see the what?
The defect. Because if I don't see the defect, I keep attaching to the desire. And everyone will see it within themselves. It's not like something outside. It's like, let's say you desire something. Everyone in the past desired things that were destructive, right? How come the desire stopped? Before the desire stopped, you saw the defects of it. Then when you saw the defects of it, you didn't take action, yet still the desire, out of habit, like, yeah, I really want to. It's like people who smoke. So first they cut smoking physically, and they're still smoking mentally. Oh, I wish I had a cigarette. Oh, I wish I... So they're still mentally smoking. So the desire still is playing itself out mentally, and if they don't take action physically, and the reason why they don't take action physically, sometimes, it's just an example, is because they see the defect of smoking. They feel bad, not healthy, the smell, whatever the defect they see. So to cut, so first I have to see the desire, see what it does, and see the defect of it. Then stop taking action because of it. And then I would actually discern it. So when it arises, I can shift the attention from it.
So that's what I was asking, just giving an example of how you're discerning, or how, for a practical example, of how you're internally using discrimination.
So let's say I see the defect, and now the desire arises. So I want to do this. Then I just ask, do I really want to do it? Do I really want to do it? And what's the reason that I even want to do it? And what do I imagine I'm going to gain from it? Because I'm aware that already desire is supported by imagination. So I go and see, okay, what do I really imagine that I'm going to get from it? So I'll be happier. Now I go and say, okay, did anything really cause me happiness? Isn't it when I'm just resting and peaceful, then I experience the most happiness? So I want to take all this action to experience happiness in the future that doesn't even exist? When I can actually directly experience it right now? So if I start to see that, I go back to, the mind start to be sane again and not insane. The mind part of the mind is insanity. And if we don't recognize that and we don't work with that, it's not going to stop just because of I don't know. It's not just happens like that. Something that has so much energy and we don't even know how many eons we fed that energy. It's not going to just stop by itself. And you know what? If somebody is waiting for it to stop by itself, they can keep waiting. I recognize that it requires effort. Means I build ignorance effortlessly. I accumulated ignorance effortlessly. It takes a mountain of effort to remove this ignorance.
Just to be clear, it's not about resistance of that thing, because it seems like that's often a trap where people talk about addictions. Then they're resisting this thing, imagining that they're going to be happier without it. But there's still then this relationship with the thing, with resisting it. I am now an alcoholic. I am whatever. Can you speak to that piece? How then?
Anytime there is resistance, you still sustain an energy on a subtle level. When you see the defect truly, means the mind is clear and you don't take action, you don't feel like you miss on anything. Means it drops by itself. So that's what people say. It just fell away. Because you recognize something for it to fall away. Also, I find in order, the idea of giving up or letting go is a false notion. because I don't even know how to let go. Because all the mind knows is getting attached to something, right? So let's say I like sushi and I like vegetarian. Now it's like I want to go to both. Yet, and I realize I can't. So if I get attached to going to eat vegan, I gave up going to eat Japanese. So in order to give up something, I have to get attached to something else. So in order to give up something, means in order to give up lower desires, I have to see the defect and I would hold on to a higher desire. And that we pull the mind to the higher mind, to a higher vibration, closer back to the source. So if there is resistance, it didn't really fall away yet. They haven't seen yet the defects fully. So means they are still mentally yearning for it. Means, what I would give an example is like, one would say, I'll use the example of money. One would say, I gave up about wanting money, yet inside them they really still want something. Wants in them money means they still, the vasana is there. It didn't fully fell away. It did, or then a woman says, no, I don't want children. Yet something in her still yearns for children. Somewhere it sneaks still. It's still playing itself out. So, or relationship. No, I don't want a relationship. It's something, there's a yearning there. It still wants the relationship, so it didn't really burn yet. It's still there on a causal body. The seed is there just waiting for it to sprout. This is what they call the second obstacle as distraction. They say distractions are basically, they call it the stupidities of the mind, playing themselves out from latent tendency, vasanas that are hidden. And suddenly it comes out and then it distracts you. And you follow that, thinking it's there, and then you swear from the path.
Distract or distract?
Distracted. I use the word distraction. Distracted. They're just the mind is distracted. So
are you using that method alone to clear the vasanas, clear the causal seeds? Like, do you find that's enough in and of itself to the discrimination and the awareness, just being aware of the patterns?
being aware is not enough.
Yeah.
Because being aware is not enough, and most people say, I'm aware of it, and it's still playing itself out. Because one has to shift the attention from it. If I'm aware of something, I'm still feeding the energy. So you look, take a flower, observe the flower, put another flower together with no water. One flower, observe it. One flower, ignore it. That flower will die faster than the one you observe it. So observing something still feeds the energy to it. One has to shift the attention from it. Again, I'm not talking about technique and methods. I'm still sharing more of an inner seeing and understanding. The expression that comes through me is not like, okay, let's do now a method. That would be very good if we have a belief and now I'll use a particular method. That's not what comes through. I notice that it's a way of life. So if one really wants to know, has a burning desire to know the truth, they would stay around. Otherwise, they just come and go, and that's it. So maybe they continue, because there's many paths for many minds. Yes, so there's no one better than another, superior or inferior. It just really what resonate according to the personality and the evolution of that mind. There's no better or worse. Don't misunderstand, yes?
I have a comment, like in the kind of the question. I put this out, I think, last time we sat, and it's around desire. You know, isn't there's a desire that comes from looking for something outside the self and from a place of lack. But isn't there desire that's the movement of creation? And for example, I have a desire to paint or to write a poem, and so from that I create something so that I can better see myself, so that I can remember something in this better way. Like, and the same goes for when I'm moved, I'm drawn to a person. You know, you could say if I really know that everything is myself, I'm not drawn to something outside myself. I'm drawn to something. I'm desiring to remember myself through them. Like, they give me a part. They help remember. So I feel confused about that all the time, because I hear all the time that desire is the root of all evil, and I don't feel like that, and it gets confusing for me along the way. Of discerning.
So first of all, when I use the term myself, so the whole universe is a part of myself, yet it's not the real self.
Yes, right.
So what happens, I myself looking for another part to complete myself because I am incomplete. Otherwise I would not look for any part, because I am already complete. So the creation, just understand, and sometimes people really get pissed at me when they hear that. Creation is going down. It's from the source. Creation is going down. It ends up like a rock. This is the movement of creation. When the mind goes back, it goes in evolution. It's nothing to do with creation. So I have different times artists and come, they start to argue with me. It's like, okay, what do you want? It's like, creation is basically a form of ignorance. So now people say, I love to create. So I said, go create, that's fine. Just recognize, you would not find the truth in your creation. You would not find, because anything that the mind creates is everything other than the truth. Because the truth cannot be created. So why the mind is creating? Because it is looking for the truth in its creation. So now it's just playing itself out. Even if you try to stop it, the mind can revolt so violently. So just be aware, this is the direction. Yet it's the wrong direction.
It's like spirit devolution, spirit becoming matter, and then evolution is matter becoming.
It's a minor distinction. I understand, and yet once you're there, once you hold that view, then is not every manifestation just an expression of the unmanifest?
No, this is just an idea of the mind to tell itself a story about something that is beyond any of that.
Well, this is where all words fall short, because as long as you're using language to try to describe the truth, you're dwelling in the realm of concepts. As soon as you create this thing called the truth, you have to create this thing called not truth to create the truth as truth. As soon as you create this thing called the unmanifest, you've got to create this thing called the manifest. All language is intrinsically dualistic. And so the highest truth is truly ineffable. And at that place, when you're holding that view, then you can bring that view down and begin to educate other parts of the system to become that view, or to wake up from the dream that they were somehow ever not that. For me, my experience is that I'm only as realized as the least realized part of myself. We all are realized beings right now. And there are many levels and strata of the manifestation, which is infinite and unending. My experience is that there is not a linear progression in which there's finally a point where somehow I've burned all my karma. It's just another dualistic fixation of this idea of getting away from karma. And this is where, for me, it gets really radical in the depth contemplation of the unending lifestyle of living in self-inquiry and the relationship, the seeming relationship between energy, consciousness, and matter, and the subject, object, and action, and refining them, and the senses of the form, the sense object, the sense door, whatever it is, however you want to distinction or divide lines between to make a reference point, whether it's the states or etc., that on that level, as long as there's some part of the system, i.e. the physical, emotional, mental strata, that to disassociate away from it is wonderful. It's like enlightenment, liberation. It takes no time to be liberated. It seems to take time for the purification and integration of that state of liberation through all the koshas. And that my experience is, and this is just my experience, is that as long as there's some part of my system that is still feeling as though it's separate or distinct from that, and there's some part of that that's thinking it's separate or distinct from something else, it's still another form of mental fixation. As subtle as it may be, as sophisticated as it may be, it's still just another strata of spiritual self-referencing, a spiritual ego.
That will pull the mind back out. Anywhere things are not resolved, it will pull the mind back out for it to realize that it's not there, so it will resolve itself. So what you're talking is correct. Whatever is not complete there, it will pull the mind out to resolve itself. This is why it's playing things out, so it can resolve itself and finish.
And yet the whole thing is a selfless, non-local, non-linear process of it's like my ego, your ego, my mind, your mind. It's the mind and the ego infinitely doing its thing. And for me, I cannot find a distinction between the dual and the non-dual, between manifestation and the manifest, between the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And from my experience, there's two main sides of the path. The Shiva side, the non-dual, self-absorption, nothing to say about it. Not a lot to say about the non-dual level, so to speak, because there's nothing to say. The Shakti side, there's a lot to say, and it's the realm of manifestation and evolution and souls and incarnation and emotions and thoughts and vibration and matter and consciousness, and that all of that evolution of that which can never not be that, as all that is, as the substratum, that there's this seeming display. I'm not saying the display is reality. I'm not saying the display is ultimate self. I'm not saying it's not self either. And so that in this progressive process of the refining between the seeming duality between existence, non-existence, between self, between not self, between ignorance and truth, all of it just keeps combusting into this alchemical combustion beyond all of it.
Okay. And from all of that is what is the vantage point? That's the key.
There is no vantage point. And that every point is a vantage point. Every time the mind fixates, that's the point. If it's a vantage point, it's creating a reference to something else. And that's the whole thing. Any fixation, whether it's dual or non-dual, whether it's in cessation or in activity, it's still a fixation. Even for my experience has been that fixating in stillness is also a fixation.
That's right. If there is fixing in stillness versus being stillness.
Right, well, being stillness, my experience is that stillness manifests itself as an endless array and display of phenomena arising in and as and returning into that. And then it just keeps doing that again and again and again, and all words fall short of this unending, never divided, beautiful display of the unmanifest and the manifest, and that there is no conflict between form and formless. That's my experience.
And look how interesting, because the mind says my experience.
Sure, and yet I could just rest in